Alright, so I'm back out here with a 787 rebuild, and a lot has changed since the last video. A lot has changed, so much so that I'm putting this crank back in, I'm putting the pistons back in. The only thing that I am rebuilding is the Rave valves. So where did we get to that from the last video? Well, if you've looked at my previous videos, the engine was locked up inside the ski. So when I took the head off, rust was all down the cylinders, pistons, and so I figured that water had gotten down into the engine, down into the crank here, and the crank was rusted out. But in the last video, I think it was the last one, when I took the pistons off and well, got those off and the cylinder jugs off, the crank started turning over fine. It was free. So it was not locked up. And when I did take it out of the case, there's not any rust. So when it did start spinning though, I thought, well, then maybe the inner seals failed and the case was full of oil. That wasn't the case either. So I'll probably splice in the video when I opened the case up and pulled the crank out, give you a look at the what the case looked like. The only thing was the milky oil in the rotary valve gear shaft area, which would make sense because water got down into the engine some way. Could have been running it on the hose and turning the engine off before we shut the water off. Maybe that is how water got down into the engine. As I said, I read a lot of message boards. Another thing is, I didn't know if it's true what I read, that if your ski tips in the lake, ocean, whatever, if you flip it the wrong way, it could dump engine water down into your engine. I don't know, one of those scenarios maybe, or just, I don't know. Either way, water got down into the engine, but it did not rust the crankshaft, and it was just confined to the rotary shaft gear area, as you're going to see in the video. Alright, I'm just going to do a voiceover of this quick video of me removing the crankshaft for the first time. And as soon as I get it out of the way and get my arm out of the way, right in the middle you're going to see the brown milky oil, and that's where the water got into the case. Now the rest of the oil that goes from one end of the case to the other, the fresh oil, I think that's the oil that I'd put in each cylinder trying to free up the pistons. So to me, everything looked really good. So I then used my ball hone on the cylinder jugs and cleaned the cylinder sleeves. I only had to do it a few seconds and the rust came right out. They were looking good. I don't have them out here. I'll splice in that video, piece of that video, so you can get a look at what the cylinder jugs look like. I didn't really hone them out. I used the ball hone for just a few seconds on each cylinder to get the rust out, and it worked. So these are good. If got enough light picking up here, the cylinders are good. Rust is gone. There's no scarring, so we're good to go there. But each step I take, everything is looking normal and fine. So I'm looking at the pistons. There's no scoring on piston walls. The cylinder walls were good, just the rust. The domes look good. Now they were covered in a thick layer of carbon, so they've been sitting for a few days in chem dip. You know, they could probably use a little more cleaning up. But again, I've been reading up on these things, and I'm just going to reuse these pistons. What I'm going to do though is re-ring, and that's it. And these are, by the way, this is not the, I'm obviously not the first rebuild. These are SBT pistons, and when I did split this case, there was a case sealant all over it, so obviously this engine's been apart before. I'm probably leaving out something, but again, I'll show you when a brief video of me taking the crank out. Take a look at the case and what I saw. The crank is in good shape, but I still wasn't sure. Here's one of the things that changed. I still wasn't sure that the crank was really good. You know, I gave it an oil bath. I spun the bearings by hand, quiet, no noise at all. But I left a message for Shade Tree Jet Ski, you know, that I was unsure about the crank. He pointed me to Ericsson Machine and Performance. I think that's it. He's got a video of how to test your bearings on your crank to see if they're good. And he actually said do something I didn't think you were supposed to do, is totally clean the bearings with some brake clean. Clean all the oil off. So I thought you'd be able to hear them a lot better. But clean all the oil out, and then he uses air compressor on these bearings to see if he can get them up to RPM, and let's see if they hold their rotation. And I can't remember, you know, everything he says. So I've done that, followed everything I saw on the video, and that tells me my bearings are good. I'm going to spin these two. These are the easiest. If I go too far, you know, trying these others are harder, my machine's going to kick on and you won't hear a thing. But we'll do these, and you know, obviously these aren't as good, but I do get these to spin, and they continue spinning, and they're still, even using the brake clean on them, they're still not a lot of noise, and so everything is good, is what I'm trying to say. I'm not going to spend hundreds of dollars for a new crank. This is going back into the engine. Pistons are going back into the engine, except with new rings. Again, I think what I mentioned is, I'll also put in the video of the Rave valve when I pulled those out of the cylinders. One was completely blown up, broken, and the push rod, paddle, whatever you want to call it, the valve was not even connected to the rest of the Rave valve. Take a look at what I found when I was taking the Rave valves off. I want to show you. So if I get down here, here's one that I took off, a little piston, I believe they call it. So this is in good shape, and the spring fits over it and the top there, and then you have screwed in, you have your valve. So when I undid one, or took the bolts out, the whole this portion, everything came out. Let me just grab this one. It came out without this attached. This remained down in the cylinder. So I pulled it out. Take a look at, it's broken, and the spring, I have not been able to get the spring out. I've given up. I've already stretched it, so it's no good. I'm gonna have to order a new one. But there we go. This is broken, so the valve was not even screwed in here, and if you can tell, this is really hard and broken, terrible shape. So I don't know, could that have been the problem, why it was locked up? Another commenter on there, Shane Gardner, I think, something, saw in one of my videos, he said, hey, you need to check your Rave valve there. He said it looks like it's stuck open. So not only was it stuck open, it was broken. So anyway, that's the only thing I'm going to rebuild, and everything else is going back into the ski. So I think I'll splice in there like I said, I'll show you the Rave valve and what I saw when I pulled it open. pull it apart. And like I said, that was a video of a couple of weeks ago when I started going the rest of the way of pulling this all apart. But I've got the, I've already cleaned them up some, but the carbon buildup maybe been the culprit here. I still got a lot of work to do on the cylinder jugs from the carbon inside the Rave Valve housing area. It's just coated with a thick carbon, as is or was these valves here. Like I said, I've already cleaned them a little bit, but as you can see, this is nothing compared to the way they were. So I've let these sit a few more days, just pull them out here, and I'll be getting a wire brush of these things and cleaning them up. But the inside of the Rave Valve housing on the cylinder is just as bad, and maybe that was the problem all along. So I'm going to get to that, but anyway, I think I have covered everything. I'm going to go ahead, like I said, and well, I've got you here. Put my air compressor to these things, get these up to speed or RPM, and I'll show you that across the board they're good. And that's the way I'm going to go with this thing. So it's really not a rebuild, just a engine cleanup, a little maintenance on some things, and that is it. I'm going to I'll get to that. I still have to clean the hull out. I'm going to replace the fuel lines, and pretty sure I'm going to replace the oil lines, and we are going to be ready to go. So let me get this air compressor here. Like I said, I'm going to follow the directions of him to tell these bearings are good. So it just continues. I'm going to stop it. This one. There goes my compressor. So it's still spinning, if you can hear me. Okay, so I'm just editing this part because of the compressor came on, and I didn't know if you could hear over that, but each one of these, the bearings are good. So I'm going to stop the video here, just letting you know, kind of catching up what's going on, what has happened these last 2 weeks, and going into this thing thinking, you know, new crank, new pistons, basically a whole new engine rebuild, down to not even a rebuild, just replacing the Rave valves. And we're going to go from there. So anyway, give me your thoughts, opinions in the comment section, what you think. And as soon as I get these parts ordered, some new rings, when the stuff comes in, we'll start the video and get this thing, start getting this thing back together, back in the ski. All right, appreciate you joining me.